Welcome to Ken's Corner Podcast, Season 4.
Hi, everyone. This is Ken from Ken's Corner, and we're back with some wrestling content. And we're here today from Prince Edward Island, which is one of my favorite places in Canada, the Bad Nanny. How are you doing today, ma'am?
I am doing great. I'm sitting in my kitchen in Tignish Shore, Myrick Shore, PEI. It's blustery, it's cold, it's rainy, and the waves are just massive today. So it's an interesting place to be right now.
Well, if anyone doesn't know about Tignish, well, they don't really speak the same way as we do. They have their way in their slangs, but it's very interesting to listen to. When I was in Prince Edward Island, I drove all the way there just to hear them speak, and that's a true story.
Yeah, it was settled by Irish and French families. They almost kind of sound like a little bit of like a Newfoundland twang to their accent too, but it's different than Newfoundland. But there is definitely a thick accent and a lot of slang that's used up at this end of the island for sure. So
Yeah.
even when I moved to Ontario, my husband, who has owns Active Relief Center, it's a sports therapy clinic, and when I started working for him when I moved up to Ontario, he was like, I don't think you can use your PEI words at the desk. He said, Ontario people won't understand what you're saying. And you know what? They didn't really understand what I was saying for a while, but after a while,
I had no clue.
After a while, my language became more like an Ontario person, but every now and then my accent comes out, and then people be like, "Oh, you must be from the East Coast," because then, and I'm like, "Oh yeah," and it always opens doors to conversation about PEI for sure.
Yeah, I imagine so, especially when you're residing there now, that it would come right back to you, like most places do. We're going to
Yeah,
go back
yeah,
in your life a little bit here, and
sure thing.
we're going to talk about before you became a professional wrestler, because you were an elected city official right there in your area. Can you talk about the experience
Yeah,
behind that? It's
yeah.
I find it very, very interesting that you went from that kind of life into professional wrestling. Let's start talking a little bit about what you did in your world of politics.
Yeah, for sure. So I was also the director of a mental health clinic for 16 years. And then I ran for mayor of my town and I lost by 2 votes. And then the next day after the election, a family called me and they said, Natasha, we all had the flu. We couldn't get out to vote. Is it too late? There's 5 votes in our house for you. I was like, oh, yes, it's too late. So then the next time I ran for council and was on council for a term. And then the next election came up again and I ran for mayor again. And that time I lost by 4 votes. So I was highly involved in my community all along. I was the president of the Chamber of Commerce and just about on every committee that I could join in my community. And that was supposed to, well, I did it because I enjoy it and I enjoy being involved, but was also supposed to like help me build my portfolio to get into provincial politics was my goal. And then maybe even hit the federal stage later on in life. So that was my original goal, was to be involved in politics. So when I lost my second run at mayor, I was like, you know what? I'm good enough to do the job. That's how I felt, because the election wasn't a landslide, it was super close, but it wasn't the time for me. It wasn't my time. So then I started dating someone from Hamilton, and we long distance dated between PEI and Hamilton for a year. And then I moved to Hamilton, and now we've been married for 8 years.
Yeah, that's
So
amazing.
yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah.
Hamilton's my next door neighbor, but I have a something for your husband. I'm not sure if he's a football fan, but my Toronto
Yes.
Argos brought it home this year.
Oh yeah. I saw.
Uh,
Yeah,
I'll be honest, half our Argo players end up in Hamilton anyway, so I do love Hamilton.
Well,
Well, not as much as Prince Edward Island, but I do
well,
love
there
it
you go, Ken.
there. Let's start talking about your professional career as a professional wrestler. Now, I'm assuming your move to Hamilton was maybe a little bit behind your start to your training.
Yes, it kind of opened some doors for me for sure. Um, also a Team Canada power lifter, or I was on Team Canada. I qualified to be on the national team 6 times. Competed for Team Canada 4. The highest I achieved was second in the world in 2019 in Sweden. And
Oh,
I won Commonwealth that same year too, and got
that's
gold in
amazing.
Commonwealth.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so it was like a banner year for powerlifting. It was amazing. And it did open some doors for me in that we had a gentleman come into our clinic, and I asked him his permission to use his name, and he said it was okay. So Chris Toast came in for treatment. And I took him into a treatment room, and he's, a pretty muscular guy. So I was like, oh, I said, we treat a lot of powerlifters in our clinic. You must be a powerlifter. And he's like, no, I'm actually a professional wrestler. I went, really? I'm like, oh, how would I ever get myself involved in something like that? And he said, well, I've got a show, Hammer and Cancer 2 in Hamilton in 6 weeks. I'll put you in. And I'm like, I have no idea how to wrestle. Like, how is this actually going to come about? And he said, well, I want you to come in. You're going to have your music. You're going to come into the ring. You're going to wear your Team Canada singlet, have your gold medals on, go in, pick up a guy, slam him, and leave. I'm like, I don't know how to pick up a guy. So we had 2 or 3 practices in a boxing ring where I practiced picking Toast up, practiced. And I'm like, okay. And then came time for the show, and I was picking up, his name's Jem. I think he wrestles out of Toronto. So I had to pick him up. But actually in the ring, it didn't quite go as smooth as I hoped. And I kind of like half picked him up and then fell backwards onto the mat with him. And I was horrifically embarrassed. So I'm like, if I am ever going to do this again, I need to go to wrestling school. So the only wrestling school at that time I knew was Hamilton Pro Wrestling. So I went to a couple of classes at that school. But I was also still competing in powerlifting at the same time, and the timing wasn't right. So I competed in powerlifting at Centrals, and then after Centrals, I wanted to wrestle with women. And then I found Off the Ropes Wrestling School in Kitchener, and they had an all-female class, so I was able to join that school, and that's where I've been ever since. So I go to school every Thursday night in Kitchener to the female class. They also have co-ed classes, and they also have a huge kids class too, that now we're like getting these little kids into the wrestling world at a younger age.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna say something real quick. I just love that studio. I have them on my Facebook. Sabrina Kyle, that's an amazing mentor and a great wrestler that's been in Hamilton for so long. Actually, I want to speak to you about your first professional match, because I was actually there. I was my first time in Hamilton as well, so it was a first for both of us. And you were actually against Sabrina Kyle. And who was the other wrestler?
So it was tag team. So Sabrina and Zyla Berry.
Zyla Berry.
They were a team, and myself and Jeff Black were the other team.
That's right.
And so I started going to their wrestling school. It was probably like maybe about March. And they told me, Natasha, you're going to have to be wrestling for a couple of years before you get into the ring, like for a full match. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. 2 years, that to me, that sounded like not enough time for me to train.
Yeah.
And then a couple months later, they're like, yeah, actually, you're going to be in a tag team match in May. So I was like, oh, okay. All right. And then we went from there. And so I've been for the first year and a half, it was a lot of um, like jumping in for a quick spot, being bad nanny, going in and picking up somebody, giving them a suplex. The audience all goes crazy because an old lady's in there wrestling, or tag team, or that type of thing. But now I've been doing some doing singles matches, which is a whole different kettle of fish, compared to if you have to go in to do a couple of dirty moves. That's all you have to remember. I'm like, okay, these are my moves. These are all I have to remember.
Yeah.
And now with a full singles match, it's like, holy smokes, there's like so much work to it, and to remember and to know the moves and study your opponent and get to know what her moves are like. And, like, can I pick them up and suplex them? What's it all going to be like? So it's been very challenging for me, because also as a competitive power lifter, I need to know 3 moves: squat, bench press, and deadlift. There are so many moves in professional wrestling that this old brain has to remember. So sometimes I find that it's a little intimidating for me. Is like moving on the fly and ad-libbing and going with it. But it's been really, really good for me to step outside my comfort zone to do something like this, for sure. If you watch some of my matches, and if you know my background, you can be like, oh yeah, that's a power lifter. She moves like a cinder block. I don't have a whole lot of reaction time and finesse, because everything's just been so set and tight for so many years of doing 1 rep maxes and powerlifting. Everything is tight, but in the ring, you have to be fluid and go with the flow, and it's completely different for me.
I guess I have a quick question for you. Is there any similarities between the 3 very different types of work that you've had as a politician, as an Olympic powerlifter, and now as a professional wrestler? Is there anything that kind of brings that all together for you?
Yeah, definitely. So in politics, I was also the chairperson for our hospital committee. So we had a volunteer committee to fight for the hospital to keep it open, because they were starting to shut down our ER and things like that. So I would speak in front of thousands of people at rallies and different events. So it helps you with being able to speak in public and ad-libbing, and your general ability to present yourself. I also used to act in a lot of dinner theaters in Tignish, and I was always typecast as a dirty old lady, even though I was 35 years old. I was always typecast as playing some dirty, cranky, perverted old lady. And that helps me with my wrestling too, is because it's not, a lot of the dinner theater, it's not scripted. So you're interacting with the audience all the time. And so you knew how to do that type of thing. So I think for my Bad Nanny character, it's been second nature to me for me to ad-lib with the audience. And come up with my character. When I have the announcer announce, and introducing Bad Nanny, she hails from Sunnyvale Nursing Home and enjoys bingo when going to the Legion. So you get to create a persona that's different and fun and unique.
That's amazing. Thank you for that answer. Where I'd like to go with you now is to your social media outlets. How can people find Bad Nanny, and do you have any upcoming events that you'd like to announce here?
So Bad Nanny was actually already taken on Instagram. So my Instagram is Badder Nanny, Badder Nanny, Nanny. So that's my mostly what I do for my wrestling. I do have a different wrestling character that I also use as well. So when I wrestle in Prince Edward Island, they didn't want Bad Nanny. So I wrestle for Island Pro Wrestling. They wanted me to go in with my Team Canada singlet and be the big, strong wrestler and go in and wrestle like that. So they asked me, okay, so what's your ring name? And I was like, oh, I've always liked Marilyn Monroe. So I said, my ring name is Caroline Monroe in PEI. And I wrestled in Tignish in August. I had 3 different newspaper articles done on me before leading up to the show.
Amazing.
I had my match sponsored by the Albertan Credit Union. And then I took that sponsor money and bought tickets for my mental health clients that I used to work with to come to my show. So I had
amazing.
10 tickets there. It was all over Facebook, and I did promos, and we had a huge crowd come out to the show. It was massive. It was great. And I was the town sweetheart. And my match was right before intermission. So that means all these kids are lining up to get my autograph. And you feel like a movie star. It's pretty freaking awesome feeling.
Well, you did have the last name Monroe.
That's right. But then after intermission, it was like a Team Canada versus Team US type of show. And I, with the Team Canada singlet, so I was obviously Team Canada. But after intermission, I walk out with the Canadian wrestler and Wesley Pipes. So he goes in and he's wrestling against the Americans. But towards the end of his match, I take the belt and slide it to the Bad American. He wins the match. I turn heel. So I went from town sweetheart to the most hated traitor villain of all times in one show. The kids lost their minds. They were so upset. They were so upset. But it was like wrestling is all about like building that emotion in people and getting it out. They were amazing. Hook, line, and sinker. They loved it.
Great.
But I mean, at the end of it, they actually hated me. So,
well, hopefully that doesn't go over into your personal life when living in Prince Edward Island. And they say, "Oh, there's that villain right there." I hope that doesn't happen.
Oh no, actually, I do hear that. I do hear that. Yep. When I'm in the grocery store, I kind of look around and go, "Oh my God, okay, who was at the show and who wasn't at the show?" Or they give me dirty looks.
That's hilarious. Do you have any upcoming events?
I don't have anything before Christmas for sure. We are talking about another show in Montague, Prince Edward Island in March. And then also in March is another show at the Shed in Dundas.
That's great. I actually have a friend from Montague, Prince Edward Island. His name's Bradford. I don't know if you've met him.
I haven't met him. I met his aunt at a softball game over the summer.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I hope you get a chance to meet him and maybe have a mixed tag team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any last words for us? This is the end of our show. It's thank you so much for coming out, but I'm just going to leave the floor open to you to anything you would like to add to your adoring fans out there.
Yeah. So when I worked for mental health, we would always do these little fundraisers for our program. And I decided to contact Red Rock Wrestling, Cowboy Mike Hughes, and I actually got him to come up to put a show on in our local arena. And then we held the canteen. So that's how we raised our money. But I started, that was probably, oh dear, that was like almost 18 years ago that I got Mike to come up to do a show in my hometown. So I've kind of had my hand in the wrestling pot a little bit. And I asked Mike one time if they ever have train any girl wrestlers, but he didn't at the time. So I never thought I would ever have the chance to be in a wrestling ring. So when it was an option for me that Toast put me in his show, it was like a dream come true. And now that I'm actually wrestling in PEI now, that's pretty, that's like a 13-year-old's dream come true. It's pretty amazing that I actually get to do this. And I don't know any beginner wrestler who is a lady who is 50 years old and is getting slammed around in a ring. Like, my kids think I'm absolutely nuts. And you know what? I think they're right to.
I'm sure they look up to you in many, many ways for you to do that and step out of your comfort zone and do something like professional wrestling.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me.
For your husband. Let's go Argos.
Yeah.
You have a great day out in Prince Edward Island. My name's Ken. We're here on Ken's Corner with the Bad Nanny, or if you're in Prince Edward Island, Caroline Monroe right there. Thank
There
you
you
so
go.
much for
There
your
you go.
time today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.